young boy discontent with life at the height of adolescence and low of his hometown, a woman who appears from somewhere beyond bringing untold attention and change into his life but madly in love with someone else, giant robots bursting onto the scene and crushing everything he thought he knew, all to a backdrop of constant references, innuendo, and at times even straight up perversion. This summary could describe a lot of anime, and chances are it was made by Gainax, the predecessor to Studio Trigger that was born from fan convention animations but grew into worldwide properties. Gurren Lagann, FLCL, and even Neon Genesis Evangelion, a titan of the industry since its release 30 years ago. Gainax, now parsed off into Trigger and Khara, bankrupt and shuttered as of last year, were masters of this insane style, the kind of shows that left you thinking, I don't know what the hell I just watched, but goddamn was it cool. You know, galaxies thrown at each other, Freud and Jung's wildest theories given exaggerated forms, and robots emerging from a penis metaphor on a boy's forehead. No matter how many video essays I make on these series, there's always some level of doubt. Were Gainax meta-narrative masters who knew how to take not just animation, but the very point of media to its limits? Were they just a bunch of immature boys who loved robots and pretty women, telling virtually the same tale of boyhood over and over, while obsessed with that older girl who humored their crush so many years ago? Nestled somewhere within Gainax's more popular stories, between FLCL and Gurren Lagann to be exact, is Magical Shopping Arcade Abenobashi, a consequence of licensing hell that makes it unavailable on any official streaming platforms, but keeps it free here on YouTube, card on screen now. The main character is instantly recognizable, the Gainax archetype of, well, any boy at 12. I wasn't much like Sasshi, and while that kind of makes a lot of sense given recent changes, but I still perfectly understand the despair at his precious collection of cards and other geeky items being lost during the redevelopment of his neighborhood. A similar thing happened to me with that long-lost 15-gallon tub of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I'm still not over it 10 years later. So if it happened to be at 12, I might have become the Joker. But it only gets worse for Sasshi, with his closest and maybe only real friend Arumi soon to leave the rundown shopping arcade so her dad can chase his dreams, moving from Abenobashi to Hokkaido to work in a fancier hotel restaurant. This summer break is the last the two will ever share, leaving Sasshi more broken than the windows of this once vibrant neighborhood's closed shops. But everything is shaken up with some magical happenings, Japanese folklore that I'm not really fit to discuss, are brought about by a disruption of the harmony of the four gods. Trying to clear a cat from the pelican statue, Arumi's grandfather pushes the scaffolding too far and falls, breaking the bird and unleashing held-back chaos in his near-death experience. What starts with dancing mushrooms and dragons in the sky at night turns into a whole new world, a medieval fantasy RPG. And then like a mecha sci-fi, and then a kung fu movie, and more that just keeps coming. It's a series of worlds like a game, each episode moving on as one is cleared, whether that's beating the boss or dating the girl, in an attempt to return to their original world, each time failing and forcing them to do it again as the paint changes, but the wall underneath stays the same. Each world is a variation of the arcade and its residents, pushing them into whatever roles need filled. It sets a formula that's, well, it's exhausting to be honest. The first episode is chock full of Gainax magic. Sasshi shooting the hose in the air just as his frustrations burst forward and then standing in the rain it makes. The way he just complained about losing his geek collection but then tosses a little bit of Star Wars crap to the side because he's too depressed about Army to think of restarting it, showing what's really important to him. That's shots of the arcade that give you an exact feel for why these two kids are who they are, born in that now run-down 1950s glamour that permeates my post-industrial town just the same. It's a masterclass in showing, not telling, without missing a beat in its transitions between jokes and silly faces to the serious expressions of two kids watching their first horror unfold. Only Gainax, and maybe just now Studio Trigger post-Edge runners, could manage to pull off this mixture of over-the-top and serious that defies genre instead to simply be human, a mirror to the wild swings of her own emotions, the contrast between chaos in this world and selves that want peace within it. Episode 1 makes you feel like this is about to be Gainax's best work ever. And then episode 2 is joke reference joke about old RPGs. And then episode 3 is reference joke about Gundam and panties. And then episode 4 is joke reference about media martial arts. And then 5 is incestuous BDM and dinosaurs with literal human breasts. And as episode 1 starts to feel like it was written by entirely different people, when you watch these later episodes, left wondering, where the hell did the Gainax magic go? Fully Coolly was only sex episodes. Oh, I'm getting a call, excuse me. Hello? Who is this? Sigmund Freud? Fully Coolly was only 6 episodes, so it had no time to get old. Despite having a similar level of nonsense to its plot, it was always grounded in the same exact characters, the same exact setting, which is slowly evolving, along with Naota's relationships and feelings that were always present. He starts out annoyed by Mamimi's attention, but still lets it happen to him anyway because he's a boy wanting to be a man, but unsure of how to do that, so he lets her do it for him. And as Haruko tests him, makes him feel more powerful and fuels his ego when he finally swings the bat, he starts to delight in Mamimi's attention instead, dragging her off to a date because now he truly does think he's the man and will make her life better. But she admits he swung the bat in a depressed tone.
Taku, he really swung the bat.
A girl who's refusing to grow up, upset that her means to feel younger is now trying to be so old, so she rejects his advances, tearing them apart and deflating his ego right back down, making him as vulnerable as he needs to be for Haruko's betrayal and then return. Between each crazy battle were genuine character arcs, and those battles themselves were still part of the point. They were chaotic to mirror the mind of adolescents overwhelmed by older women's advances. Emerging from this boy in response are things he doesn't understand, yet which he has to deal with anyway. Puberty is a battle no one understands. In the end, these fights weren't really nonsense. Here in Abenobashi, without any kind of grounding in one setting or group of people, at least not really, with time taking up having to introduce a new world and new references, that underneath falls off harder than a Rust Belt used car. None of the jokes are doing anything but being jokes. As in this episodic adventure, there is no plot to develop, no arcs to follow, because there is no consistency. You can't show a boy's relation to his world if that world is changing more than he is. The point is simply, that's the thing you like! Plus, Fully Coolly being more nonsensical helped it. When they explain the whole NO brain magic portal thing, it feels like it does in Scott Pilgrim. It being poorly explained is the joke. You don't even have anything to try and grab onto to find out what's happening, so there's no reason to try and work out the details. But here, in invoking old myths, Abenobashi explains itself just enough to leave an unsatisfying thread that feels more like an excuse to tie it to reality, to say to the kids who've been taught this myth in school, oh, look, this could happen to you too, watch the show. Which then requires characters like Abe, who tie into figures that those myths involve, offering like a handwave explanation, only taking even more time away from our main cast who were already underdeveloped. By episode 6, the exhaustion really sets in. The previous worlds were all things aimed at kids, dinosaurs, giant robots, so there was some amount of a pass because there's often less substance to that stuff anyway. It leaned into a ridiculousness that can only be achieved in animation with typical anime properties. So if nothing else, it felt like a love letter to the nerdy media which highlighted this medium's specialities, its detachment from reality. You don't get such vivid combining robots and demon lords in live action. Like, sure, Super Sentai, also Power Rangers has it, but is it really as cool as this? At the very least, the show was offering something unique to its medium. But in the 6th, it goes from kid to adult, anime to real, swapping into film noir, something which doesn't mesh with what the show was doing. There really isn't ridiculous action in noir. There's brooding men, almost sickeningly dour conversations about loneliness and despair. To do a noir in this ludicrous anime style doesn't add anything to it because it has to be set in reality, and the match between medium and intent is lost. The joke simply becomes more forced, because now it isn't the best moments of fun things I love making fun of themselves, but more like, this is just a worse version of a different thing I could watch. So why am I watching this one? Like, I don't want to listen to a 12-year-old recount the movie their parents watched last night to me, remembering only the actions and guns and the substance. I just want to watch the movie myself, experience the grit and the dirt for a reason and get the message. And just at the moment of exhaustion is where Gainax brilliance returns. The end of the episode reveals that each time they try to jump home, Sasshi has been thinking of these fantasies, taking them to the world which matched. And a few episodes later, it grows even more, revealing that he wasn't just jumping between innocently, he both started this escape and creates each new one. It wasn't the pelican that fell, it was Arumi's grandfather. Basically his own family, and the only voice trying to keep them in town, all but closing the restaurant and dooming every hope he had in a moment of first loss right before his eyes. Unable to handle this, Sasshi unknowingly taps into his family heritage in the Onmyōdō technique, and in this arcade's channeling of chi to create this escape. All of these stories and their lack of depth, their stupidity, it isn't escapism for us, it isn't Gainax being silly, it's escapism for Shinji. We're supposed to get sick of it so that we can understand something about him, and in a way, the author's intent too, everything Gainax. The overall point it gets into is that a world of stories alone, of escapism, means nothing. Only experience does. Sasshi being a child isn't strictly saying something about the youth, but rather the most common expression of lacking experience. A time in every single life that has ever existed where what we can experience is very limited, where we don't yet know how powerful life's moments can be. In short, good stories are bad lives. Well, good stories are actually full lives, but that line doesn't let me make a reference. Let's start to explain with the noir episode. It has the line,
"It's our fate not to be able to settle in one town for long. In the end, we're just two migrating birds."
Which is what you'd expect at the end of such a movie. Something the detective says just before either he or the love interest has to skip town to avoid some terrible fate. To the person writing that line, at the end of the movie, it's an expression of the truth they want the audience to take away. Even strong love can be powerless against the wills of a wider world. Time and time again, chance will tear apart what we know and love, leaving us with only the memories of what was and dreams of what could have been. It parallels it to something natural, birds leaving instinctually, and makes it spoken so easily because it is natural, an act of survival. You either accept it or it tramples you. To hold on is to die. The whole movie is there to express that feeling that they have gained across their entire life. But Sasshi, imitating a noir, puts the line at the beginning, only to have the plot he creates drive them right back together by the end. To him, it's just something that sounds cool to be thrown around, an image not of survival via nonchalance, but rather nonchalance itself without depth. Because what else could it be to him? This whole thing is exactly because he doesn't want to experience loss, so any theme about such a thing goes over his head and has gone over his head for his whole life, leaving only the parts of it that he has experienced, like the cool, strong nature of manhood it displays, to be unbothered even by the worst of emotions because that's how boys are told to be. A near universal experience, that's what the line is going to mean to him because that's the context he has. It can change his understanding. For example, a young boy may see this as the first example of detached, cool masculinity applying to relationships, and that alters how he'll carry himself in that situation. But that does not create the experience itself, and this is the wider point. Stories do not actually provide us with the ideas, but they reword, they reshape, they help us understand the things within us which are hidden deep below, or which we might have learned but not understood yet. Entertainment does not impart knowledge on us, only helps us parse and understand what we've already gathered from experience and education and more. Alright, editing me coming in with just a bit of wording correction. I didn't like how definitive that last little bit sounded. I don't think it's necessarily that stories can never give you new information. Like, obviously, watching Psycho-Pass, I think that did impart genuine information on me. I just think the ability to care for it and understand it, and a lot of the power comes from experience first. Meaning that, like, the first time I watched Psycho-Pass, I dropped it after a few episodes because it just wasn't getting to me. Like, I didn't find anything interesting about the ethical dilemma of, should you maximize happiness for the most people at such an extreme cost to essentially your forgotten citizens, the people you are discarding to achieve that. Like, what is the cost there? To me, as a kid who was really just focused on, like, when's the next time I can play video games, it just didn't mean much to me. So it was there, and it had information in it, information that I now know as an adult, that it did teach me in a sense, but I had to have some conceptualization of it there first for it to matter to me, for me to want to pick up on it. And it didn't strictly put all of the information there, but ordered the things that were already in my head, or really expanded upon the ideas. So I think the proper wording would be more to say that stories do not inherently impart information on you, but if they are covering something that you have some care about, if they pull you in some, like, emotional way, but again, that relies on, like, why are you relating to that character to then learn that information that maybe isn't important to you but is important to them. Like, there has to be something there. So the overall point really shouldn't be that they don't teach you, but that they cannot give you the experience to care about things. Only you can do that yourself, and they then build upon that. This is what makes escapism so dangerous then. With only entertainment, the inexperienced will never grow. So the next logical question then is if growth matters. Do we actually need experience to have a good life? Well, I think we see a yes answer in episode 3. Now, this episode has the same flaw as Fully Cooley's third episode, and to be honest, it almost made me stop watching the show, but powering through how creepy it is that Gainax did this twice, what we find is, I guess, like a mecha parody in general. It's got a Gundam fighting TTGL gunman to the score from Evangelion. I'm just going to take Gurren Lagann as my pick to contrast it against with what a recurring aspect entails: combining. In Gurren Lagann, the combining is often a joke, especially the first time, coming about from nothing more than Kamino's ego about the number of faces. But that's exactly the point. He's an idiot. Sure, he made a great legend for everyone to follow. His endless bravado worked against the endless despair and oppressed humanity felt in a way that simple, logical optimism didn't. Look at Littner Village, never thinking to take a gunman, but him doing it immediately. Someone stupid who would try nonsensical things is what they needed to have the risk that would outweigh such an oppressive force. But Kamino wasn't doing it because he understood that. He was doing it because he was dumb and wanted to be a big legend. And since no one on the surface had seen all his failures down in the pit, they took it as real power. He's great for the situation, but only kept alive time and time again by Simone, a terrible leader. And because he stole the spotlight, leaving behind a vacuum that no one feels they can fill, and humanity almost loses their way due to this. The point of combining is that Kamina is nothing alone. It's a literal, physical expression that togetherness is power, filling the gaps that an individual is always going to have in their ideas. It's dumb, but it's meaningful, and if anyone has read into this and understood it, a lot of pain would have been avoided. That's why Gainax, who knew exactly that, proved in the fact that they did it 5 years later, parodied it here without any meaning, where Sasshi is combining with random gags like Frieza and a dog and an old lady, because to a kid whose only problems have either been as trivial as homework, or so exceedingly beyond him that they didn't even feel fightable, there isn't yet an idea that he wouldn't be fit to deal with them alone or would have to work to handle them. He is Kamina without Simone, idiot bravado almost getting killed because he wants to shout attack names. He gets demolished because he insisted on them taking turns performing moves and then tried to launch missiles when he was being charged, a move which doesn't at all fit the situation because he doesn't recognize situations. He recognizes what the dream in his head is. A punch is appropriate but boring, so it will never be recognized by fantasy. This is exactly why Arumi does well in the fight instead of him, because she's actually concerned with winning, not with flash. She sees it for what it is and carries them, yet all the while he insists that the importance is on yelling out a cool name, finding credit for the victory in doing so, because what else could it be? His problems up until now, save the one he's expressly trying to escape, have all been small enough that a cool name does best them. But Arumi is more powerful because she does know, because simply accepting the move and coming to terms with it means she's allowed for new experiences, even if she hates it. She is accustomed to making something of struggle. So in this world she hates attacks her, she's ready to roll with the punches and respond to it in true, not just an image of it in her head. Sure, she doesn't get to launch the missiles, but she does get to live, and that's probably more important. Well, she's handing a world she hates its ass, he's getting his handed to him by the one he loves. The realist can see the point, while the escapist can only see the aesthetics. In short, fantasy doesn't just only mean something with life behind it, but it actively keeps us ill-prepared for life if it's all that we have. So what's left to the escapist, both lacking experience and ill-prepared for it, is nothing but quantity over quality. If you can't make one deep world, then you need 100 shallow ones to jump between so you never notice this fact. And this is where such an interesting thing comes into play, and not just medium, but distribution. Some shows could arguably be long movies, and some movies could arguably be short shows. Hell, we even see this with Gurren Lagann, which was packaged into movies because the overall arcs are what's important, not the episodic stories. But Abenobashi arguably only works specifically in 22-minute chunks distinctly separated from each other. It needs to feel like that's all there could have been to these worlds, because that's the truth. What we see is all there is. The space station is contained within itself, walked across in just a few minutes. The RPG is one linear town and it's just a linear story, a single road followed to the boss. There's not much to them, so if you spent any more than these 22 minutes exploring them, you'd see how fake and terribly thought out and empty they are. There's no message to chew on, no theme to ponder to extend their runtime in your head or make for a rewatch. They're almost disposable. We aren't jumping between them so quickly just because it's a contractual obligation of broadcasting, but because that's what they are to Sasshi. Not Arumi's plans for a carefully thought out future, but a few minutes of entertainment in the art. They're impossible to build into anything more because what experience is there to build up? The same people shoved into ill-fitting roles, the same structure underlying each one. Look too long and this becomes apparent. He only knows these few specific things. The bits of reality it's born from start to set in, and its nonsense becomes visible, and it stops being a distraction as pattern-loving brains find patterns. With no ability to make deep worlds, the escapist needs to be able to jump at a moment's notice. They need to be episodic. This awareness is something Sasshi actually directly pushes down in episode 4. 1 is lonely, 2 is a coincidence, and 3 is a pattern, so in this third world they face, the Kung Fu one, he's finally starting to see that pattern. I mean, he's supposed to be fighting a powerful foe known far and wide, and yet all he has is 2 minutes of a training montage which was supposed to be 36 trials, but which only amounted to 4 because actual training is boring. Soon after, he deflates. He also has a referential jumpsuit that is supposed to make him more powerful, but all it does is make those pulpy punch and kick sounds, leaving him even more deflated. It's simple. These things are not substance, they're movie magic. The tricks which are used to cram what's meant to be years of effort into 5 minutes of a plot because you're on a limited timeline. They don't actually equate to effort, they denote an effort that we as the audience infer from our experience with developing our skill in the real world. But Sasshi, a young kid who's collected junk and never worked hard, to him a montage doesn't denote training elsewhere, it simply is training itself to him. That's the only reference he has for it. Like a kid playing hero, he thinks you become powerful in just a few minutes. He deflates right after the training because it didn't actually change him. A kid with no experience doesn't know what change is to mimic it in their head even. That is, even in this fantasy, there's no basis for strength, realized just as, for the third time in a row, he's tasked with taking down a powerful foe. How does this make sense? With a moment of thought, the fantasy starts to crumble. In a world which plays by inverse rules, an attempt at actual effort has left him weak. But what saves him is those rules, remembering that this world works how he does. Looking back at the previous episodes, he thinks,
ever since we came to this freaky world, things worked out just by going through the motions.
That is, by simply leaning into the nonsense, not questioning it, pushing the depth further and further away and jumping from reference to reference. So that's what he does here, going from struggling against his foe with his own thoughts, to beating him down with goofy moves from anime, fighting games, and a Kamehameha to top it all off. In this little cycle which has been created out of escapist fantasy, where everything is built on a lack of depth, to grow is to paradoxically destroy the escape that you've built, to be weak within it. So he escapes, and the more he escapes, the less he can escape the escape, because the escape is built on the escape itself. Actual growth gets harder and harder. As he gleefully admits to Arumi when she baits him with a simple remark about these worlds maybe being kind of fun, he would jump between them forever if he could.
So even when we're chanting the spell to go home, all I can think about is what's gonna show up next. It's just so much fun.
Much like Fully Cooley, the visuals here are quite literal. He's unbothered by the fact that he's literally shrunk himself down, mirroring his regression, while she towers above him in her acceptance, and he is just a caricature. Arumi serves as an important outside influence against this cycle. That is, because she is present here. Because she needs to be convinced, the cycle will be made apparent in a way that wouldn't really happen to Sasshi alone. In his own head, he could replay those 22-minute stories over and over again, as we all do with fantasy. Little details change over time as they adapt to our current situation, the core elements remaining, but the action's slight shift preventing it from being a stale pattern. Maybe this time it's not a demon lord, but a dragon, or now the fight ends in a massive punch, not an energy blast. The favorite ones get worked on more, get some amount of depth just in their repetition, that there are more key moments and variations to work through. Jumping between these all, they stay vivid enough. But with Arumi as the observer, he can't just repeat, because she's already expressed a hatred for each one. So he's left running down the ranks, going from vivid childhood fantasies, his favorites, to noirs, things he's simply seen in the background, rather than pondered again and again, eventually devolving into an episode which is nothing more than every American movie reference slapped together. A Back to the Future, Die Hard, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, RoboCop, Terminator, and even more. Where the Kung Fu story at least implied training. In the RPG world had a hint of detail on the number of enemies, this world is a mess, quite literally just breasts and pecs, because that's all he knows of these properties, how they look, nothing of how they mean. Unable to repeat, the lack of depth is supplanted with pure referential excess, making the game all the more obvious. He knows nothing, and he's gained nothing across all of this. Left to explore all of his mind, we only see an ever-worsening unoriginality, a downward spiral. Eventually, they end up in a blank void with nothing but his desperate crayon-crushing attempts to draw something from his own head, ending in failure because there's nothing new in there. As he admits himself, missing the point in a tantrum.
New York. How the heck am I supposed to create New York if I don't even know how to spell the word?
He says right there that the mind needs to be fed by reality, but is so upset over the fact that it means nothing to him. Just like his stories, the meaning is missed in raw emotion. This is reflected in his relationship with Arumi, one which is slowly worsening even as the purpose of this was to maintain it. In the dating sim world, Sasshi asks Arumi to remain in a shrunken, tortured by chickens form for longer so that he can try and go back and complete a different route instead, right after they had supposedly a meaningful moment where she cried about how awful it was and he promised to end it. upset at his blatant selfishness, she grows huge, destroys this site, and runs off, leaving Sasshi alone to be found by Abe, the guy who's kind of responsible for this all, and who offers to train Sasshi more properly on the Onmyōdō ways. But there's no actual training from a man who just turns out to be a reskinned Masato, instead leaving his pupil with not a deep understanding of this mystical power, but a starter kit. A children's starter kit, like what you would get a 10-year-old who's going to give up on this new interest in stage magic after a week. And, well, this actually makes him more powerful. He can change worlds and make new ones on the fly, creating giant bears by accident and making Arumi a magical girl in an instant. And it's because of a child's playset. In this inverse world, his power is greater the more childlike he is. So what else is he going to do but get more childish, refusing to see reality even if that reality is Arumi? In this world, which is just a remake of the first one, he throws a lifetime supply of cheerleaders and game consoles at her, thinking that it'll finally make her happy. And of course it fails. Those are things he likes, not her. Okay, well, what do girls like then? Cinderella, that's a popular one. Oh, damn, she's denying that one too. Okay, how about magical girls? That's something they all enjoy, right? He runs through plan after plan with a naming scheme that could just be nonsense, but if it isn't, denotes that he has an entire alphabet of plans. Pure quantity and no quality. Anyone could see that Arumi doesn't like these kinds of things. She's simply dressed, mild-mannered, and her logical catchphrase is,
Being human, having your health, that's the most important thing.
like, this is his best friend, the most important person in his life. Sasshi should know she hates these things. She literally told him when his collection was lost that at least he still had his health. Why would she want a collection of her own? At some point he did know that. But after all this fantasy which demands as little reality as possible, he doesn't know anymore. Because here, there aren't people. People are too real. There are only tropes. Flat characters fit into 22-minute boxes because any depth would spoil the fun, slow down the excessive action until it's pushed out. He's reduced his best friend down to girl tropes and nothing more, all while saying to himself, I'm thinking of you, don't you get it? As if this was a selfless act. A kid playing with a magic kit, telling himself that the tricks are for other people. It gets so strained between them that the next world, a war movie, is their families fighting each other to death and turning the shopping arcade into rubble with constant barrages of missiles, quite literally destroying everything this fantasy is supposed to save. It couldn't be more obvious. There's nothing left. But as often happens to a packaged discussion, so far we've been mostly engaging in a binary topic, having experience versus not. But the truth is, no one has zero experience. Even a child has some amount of it, has powerful moments that stick with them. And that's true for Sasshi. The setting isn't always a reskin of the shopping arcade with its residents stuffed into tropes just because he's unoriginal, but because he wants to be unoriginal. He wants to stay in this place which has housed every important moment of his life. He's confined in this space because it's what he desires more than anything, because he sees no reason to dream of something beyond the place which has his best friend, his family, his favorite meals, his first purchase with his own money, his first and favorite everything, all contained right here in a remnant of the post-war era that you don't get many other places. It's not that nothing is important to him, it's that this place is so damn important to him that he's willing to sacrifice every other one which has existed, does exist, or will exist in order to keep it alive, recognizing deep down that it's being shuttered and bulldozed, that soon it will be gone, and mourning the loss preemptively. The most crushing line of the series is when he says that the actual Abenobashi of the real world that they have now returned to isn't so.
The town we were born in has stores who've known each other for ages. You could search all over the entire world and you wouldn't find a better town.
To make it so vibrant in his head time and time again, it's his love for the place, a return to the glory it bestowed on him and all of those memories, every aspect of who and why he is. The limitation of fantasy is not the mistake. For him, it is the point, the way he declares his love and dedication to important things. And yet it destroys him, leaves only rubble. I mean, even in his fantasy, the bulldozers can't be stopped. They just take the form of tanks. So what can we do against this force of change, which robs us of everything important, makes all good things come to an end? Of course, Arumi offers a different take, the realist's take. Not how to solve the issue of change as pain, but how to lessen it and make it work for us rather than against us. Of course, she's just as sad about the slow, creeping death of the shopping arcade, which, in her own words, won't exist anymore in 10 years' time, even if she can also say,
No matter where I go, there's no way I'll ever find a town that I love more than this place.
when something, someone, some place dies like this, we often think about how memory preserves it, and that's core to Sasshi's fantasy as well, that so long as he can keep himself out of reality, this place will forever be kept alive in his memories. It will never reach the state of death that it is clearly marching towards. But in that, it also won't be respected. Sure, it seems like it is, deified in his mind, but really the way it shapeshifts, the way it's distorted and parodied time and time again, this is disrespecting it. Arumi begins to show why when she talks about the move to Hokkaido, terrified at the prospect of moving to the northern end of the world, only to grab a globe and say that that's nowhere close to it, that a straight line drawn between Abenobashi and Hokkaido doesn't even lead north, but it curves with the earth to reach New York City. And that changes this for her. Looking at the whole world has entirely shifted how she places this shopping arcade in the world. Like, she kind of didn't even know where it was before. And so, can't this change how she feels about it too? Like, if she goes somewhere further south, suddenly this place will feel more north. And if she goes north, it'll feel more south. At such a small speck on the globe then, does she actually know where this place is? What this place is? Does she know whether its traditions are shared elsewhere, its meals made the same way, its kind of people unique or standard? In not knowing anything about the rest of the world, she lacks a frame of reference to know what is special about Abenobashi and what simply is about it. To visit other places isn't to forget it, it's to finally know its shape for the first time. And similarly, while Sasshi proclaims that it's the best place in the world, if that was true, then why would he be scared of going to other places? If it's really the best, he should be able to go anywhere with total confidence, knowing that none of it matters, that none of it would change his opinion. But deep down, it's probably a fear of the unknown, and of how enjoyable the unknown might be. To proclaim its worth and then to never test it, that isn't respecting the place, that's calling it weak, worried that it won't hold up. Arumi wanting to leave is embodying that respect, saying that she loves it more than anywhere else, so she trusts it to remain true even after seeing America and Africa and Europe and everywhere else. Love requires trust. Without it, it's just lust. And for how much fantasy may keep something alive, exploration can keep it more alive. Fantasy is inherently unreal, within the mind only because if it was, then it would just be reality. It must always be detached, internal, and so it can only keep things alive for one person, unexpressed to the world by mental law. And sitting there in that one place forever, it's containing it within itself, preventing its customs, its food, its memories from reaching wider places. Exactly what Arumi would have in her travels. I mean, think about it. Someone from Abenobashi in Abenobashi is like fantasy, self-reinforcing. But someone from there out in the wider world, someone with an accent that makes people ask where from, someone with a mentality that makes people ask why, with a specific preparation that piques interest. It's all a chance for some small part of what this place imparted on her to be shared into the wider world. Diluted, yes, but alive within that epic causality. If she travels far and wide and someone falls in love with her, that's someone falling in love with a part of Abenobashi itself. It's a place that is going to come to an end. Everything does. So if nothing from it ever reaches out, when that moment comes, everything about it will simply be caught in the rubble. To keep it alive in this endless cycle of life and death requires leaving it behind and sharing it, and maybe even helping it to be reborn. We go out, we test it against the rest of the world, and we find what was truly special about it. Those things that were only a part of then and there. And with everything we learned, we make the next, newest, greatest version. Not the same place, but the best parts of it reborn and collected. After all, isn't this what someone is trying to do with the shopping arcade? In the tearing down of their dreams, someone else's are reborn. It's a cycle that can't be helped when there are billions of people, ever increasing in only the same amount of space, the same amount of real estate in a city you love. Each time someone buys a house and slaps on a coat of paint, that's one dream, one perfect place, being replaced with another. We're all feuding in this limitation, bidding against each other for our time and place to carry forward what we find truly important against what they do. This can be made better for sure. The system we know of fucking landlords and private equity makes this so much worse than it needs to be, artificially raises the scarcity, but even with that done away, we can never escape an overall limited planet, billions of wills in only so many places. The kids who are weak, inexperienced get their hopes and dreams bulldozed by the adults who are powerful, who once served their due as the former. It's sad. It's real fucking sad. But looking at that, do we resign ourselves to a space only inside of our heads, just sitting idly by as dreams are crushed and allow a few people to hoard all of that power? Or do we take that sadness and learn from it, force ourselves out into the world to share the thing we loved and keep it alive in the process and learn and become stronger, and as such shape ourselves into that powerful adult to start our importance's rebirth? That's why this means so much, this expanding out to keep the idea alive. It challenges us, widens our perspectives to new and better ways, to new jobs, to new languages, to challenges to be overcome which dictate that we handle worse and worse problems, trivializing everything we thought it was world-ending as children. It makes the tanks of redevelopment not just back into bulldozers, but into paperwork, flimsy and conquered with nothing more than a pen. Reaching out doesn't just keep the idea alive, it helps it be reborn into physical space, whether that's a single house or a whole neighborhood. The pain is always going to be there, but it can be for nothing or it can be for something. That's the only choice we have to make. And this is where fantasy is a good thing. In that tension of everyone scrambling to keep their importance alive, well, nothing is gonna end up how we think. We can prepare all we want, but the world changes out from under us due to those billions of other wills in ways we can never predict, and our plans fall flat. We can make agreements with other people, but can only control ourselves. We can develop every skill we think we'll need only for a new technology to render it worthless. We can make the perfect resume for the perfect job only for an expert of 20 years to move into town for family and lose it to them. Because the world changes, because we make it change, in this battle of keeping our importance alive, where we aim is never where we end up. And so we have to aim for the stars to end up on Earth. Take Arumi's dreams of visiting every continent and then one day seeing the entire Earth from space, from the moon, sometime 10 years from now. The chances are this will never happen. An average girl from a rundown town on the salary of a chef, it's not likely that she'll go to space, see Antarctica, and maybe not even every continent, especially not in 10 years' time. It is fantasy, like the story of some famous explorer that only really happens in books and on the big screen. In short, a lie. But a lie crafted to fill our hearts, to set sights high. Yes, it won't actually happen, but this kind of idea is what lets her come to terms with a move to Hokkaido, a first step on a grand adventure, 1/20th of that line to New York. It's what takes it from painful to optimistic, the training grounds of a much greater future. Yes, it sucks to leave behind her home and her best friend, but if she's gonna hit the moon in some 10 years, then she's gotta get started right now. There's no time to waste just thinking about the idea all day, but only keeping it in the background as inspiration for the actions that make it so urgent, the good grades and the funds it requires. The point is not that it drives her to work, but that it drives her to work for something she finds important, and that it makes the work so dedicated because of its high aim that when it inevitably fails from the conflict of every other will, every other kid who wants to be an astronaut, well, she'll still end up somewhere pretty good. No one sees the whole world, but the people who try to will see the most of it. While at best Sasshi only has what's in his head in a dead arcade, at worst she'll have some little place that brings it all back to life, whether that's love, location, or anything. Of course, this introduces the possibility for disappointment when those fantasies are too high, and that's a whole topic of its own. But nevertheless, fantasy is not evil. It's what lets this system of tension work, what allows each person to have their moment in the sun throughout this limitation. The problem is when we start to see fantasy as its own end, even though it's nothing, just a lack of reality by definition, terrible in its unbounded nature. It's only good when we return from it inspired to make this one world, not those 100, even better. And this is what Sasshi accepts when she expresses it to him. That if the inevitability of change can't be fought, if the wills of others need to be respected for our own to be, then all we can do is roll with the punches, make ourselves change for the better if we're going to change anyway, and use fantasy as our tool to do this. They begin to leap back to their own world, the real world, and... Wait, no, what's he doing? Why is he yelling out for fantasy? Why is he calling for Abe, the like guy who made this escapism possible? And why is he actually showing up? And who is that? What do you mean? What do you mean he's making a new fucking world? He's just old now? But then he's young. The whole series was saying that this was terrible, and then he fucking does it. He's just some other figure from myth that you're supposed to know and be like, oh, so it's more. What was the fucking point, Gainax? What was the fucking point? The ending of Abenobashi is contentious, to say the least. It spends 12 episodes laying out the dangers of escapism, the necessity of growing up and facing down change, and then in the 11th hour has Sasshi called to his later, more powerful self to create the ideal world that he once desperately failed to scribble in crayon, all in a span of 2 minutes with no indication that this would happen. You can probably guess when I was watching this from that poll I put out. But in truth, it's actually that there was no indication within the show itself, but a massive indication in Gainax as a whole. The show presents the harsh reality, and then uses its last gap to present what it thinks the world could and should be instead. Something that's actually present in almost all of Gainax's works. For as much as Gainax's major stories are touted as coming of age, I think that's actually a simplification. Evangelion Shinji is a child with the depression of an adult, terrorized by the pull of adulthood both in his desires and in his responsibilities. Rei, who's cold, Asuka, who desires to be an adult herself, and the literal adult women around him, Shinji's torture is in having no one willing to share in the mistakes of adolescence with him, so terrified of making a mistake that he'd rather take pleasure from a comatose girl than actually do anything real. The end is him accepting himself, his right to exist, even if he's flawed, inexperienced, a kid. Simon does grow up in Gurren Lagann. He accepts many things that a child never could, turning from an unconfident mess into someone who knows his own power. But he really only grows up in one way, in how he fights. He was a better leader than Kamina, but Rasuyu was the real president. Simon was just a warrior who rose to that height from his past actions. He accepts being an adult and fighting the anti-spiral and his sacrifices for humankind, but his final action is expressly not to mature into a leader, but to leave it in someone else's hands and return to where he started. An unknown figure in a cloak, Simon the Digger, and nothing more. And Naota, his whole story is about the downfalls of trying to be too mature at too young of an age, getting taken advantage of by older women in his desire to be grown up. In skipping his childhood and trying to shoot right to the status of his older brother, he becomes weak, ineffectual, and selfish, a boy facing down the world without any teenage mistakes that force him to grow, struggling to kiss Mamimi from a whole foot below, believing she truly loved him. He ends the show admitting that he loves the older Haruko in this so childish way, and his power comes from that, for finally letting his true self show through this child in it, and she rejects him for it, as he's left there holding this base that is much too large for him, an instrument he has to grow into because he is not an adult yet.
'Cause you're still a kid, Takun. Save it for next time.
Across the board, these stories are not about growing up, but being mature enough to not grow up yet. To turn from sad, depressed, and jaded boys who think they're men into, well, just boys who are finally able to live happy lives. Abenobashi is the same. Gainax's thesis on the point of their own work. The whole show is presenting reality as it is, and then the final minutes are them presenting reality as they think it should be. A world where just enough immaturity keeps things simpler, kinder, where everyone can get their little slice of heaven without redeveloping over someone else's dreams. I mean, if everyone could just laugh at something inherent to people, a fart, a joke about a fart together, things would be more friendly, right? The world Sasshi creates is an expression of this. A place where instead of being torn down, the shopping arcade is invested in. Arumi's father not having to move somewhere to open a fancy new French restaurant, but where people from those places come here to help him do so. That is where the grandfather gets to stay with the place he created and loved for so many years, where the father gets to fulfill his dream, and where hopefully Arumi will get to be wealthier, more exposed to outside cultures coming in, more educated from a better school, and able to travel the world for stints at a time, more than she may have on a lower salary and lower advantage, all while still having a home right here. Is this the kind of world that would be possible if everyone's minds stayed a bit more simple socially? If our desires didn't get wrapped so up in needing every story to mean the world, but we're okay with just having big robots busting into each other's faces for a second? All kids share in being a kid, in being inexperienced. But the process of gaining experience separates us all out, reduces that ratio of common memories. So, yes, we should grow up. We should do our part to make the world work, but also we should focus on those things that we all share. That's what it means to be together. That's the basis for empathy, isn't it? Even Arumi admits she enjoyed a little bit of those fantasy worlds, near the end saying to Sasshi something like this.
Aren't you done yet? I've had tons of fun and even enjoyed some of it in my own way.
But we never see it because she's holding herself so much to reality. Like when she looks at the magical girl opportunity like that, is that really just for the joke? Or was she tempted in just pushing that feeling down? Was she able to be happy with nothing more than a silly outfit, but was so convinced of seeing the world that pleasure became an almost impossible task that required a lifetime of effort instead? Is it wrong to take the easier path to being happy when it doesn't impact anyone else? If she was going to be stuck in these stupid worlds for a bit, wouldn't it have made sense to enjoy it at least a little bit instead of hating it the whole time? Not enough to get stuck, but just enough for it to be a good memory instead of a bad one. Maybe that bit of excitement could have drawn them closer, let them express not anger at each other, but agreement. They lost sight of what they could share, going too far in different directions of maturity. This whole ending is idealistic and silly, and its execution was straight up piss poor. But if anyone has the right to say it, wasn't it Gainax? I mean, they started by making fan animations for a convention in the 1980s. Nothing more than point and smile references to all the properties they geeked out about kids, rough and raw around the edges, but overflowing with this emotion of loving this thing, and grew into the studio that made everlasting properties and spawned two more just the same. They rose to popularity by combining the silliest of our childhood fantasies with the most depressing of adult truths, by deciding that yes, stories did have to mean something so we didn't get stuck with pure fantasy, but also if we know that, that's no reason why that needs to exclude boobs and robots. They made ludicrous action not just an interlude between serious points, but part of the point, combining everything a kid would love with everything an adult values alike. Like, these guys did it. They grew up in service of staying kids, and in doing so united so many people, so many ages under the same tastes and the same stupid flag from the same stupid show. They did all of this by becoming just adult enough to hardly manage a schedule, but not enough to ever start making generic stories to stay afloat. And if we all wanted to see that so much, if we all gave them the eyes to be one of the most well-known studios of the whole time, then isn't it somewhere in us too? Their popularity was proof, and their ending a warning. Maybe they didn't grow up quite enough. But clearly, somewhere in there is a balance, where we grow up, but only to keep the excited kid inside of us alive. So rest in peace, Gainax. You truly did change the world, one dick joke at a time. And that'll wrap things up for this one. I was like about to do a whole rambly outro, and then that would just be me more like gushing over old Gainax stories, which I kind of already did here. Very, very interesting thing. It's like a bunch of guys who never grew up somehow making stories that like spoke to very mature things, with also just tits and robots constantly fighting. It's like difficult to express what was lost in that studio going down. It's a complicated topic because like there's tax evasion and like mismanagement and a lot of weird stuff going on there. Like they didn't make payments to Khara, which is Hideki Anno's studio, one of the founders of Gainax, who broke off, and they made the Evangelion rebuilds and so on. But it's interesting because like Trigger, as an offshoot of Gainax, has made stuff that like kind of carries forward the spirit, but never quite exactly. Like it felt like they like got running with Kill la Kill, and then like Little Witch Academia, Brand New Animal. Like there were just a few series that like were very similar, and had that like ridiculousness, but which lacked that kind of depth behind it, which had these like really generic villains where honestly sometimes like Gainax stories didn't even have like straight up villains. Like in Brand New Animal, there's this like super generic one who ends up having like godlike powers, but then you look at like Fooly Cooley when it was Gainax and not Trigger, and there really isn't like a defined villain to that. Like it's kind of Haruko, but there's no one you point to and go like, oh, they're what's making all the bad things happen. Like things are just happening and people are responding to it, and like it's just smart stuff like that that makes that story of adolescence work, because the world is just happening to you as a kid. Like you don't control shit. So it's just so weird that they managed to do like some exceedingly smart things while also being obsessed with giant robots and boobs. I don't think we've gotten that since. I think Trigger's getting there. Like I think Edge Runners is them moving into that spot. Like that obviously had outside writing, which I think was probably a big part of that. But that was the first time where it was like, it felt like the ridiculousness was really part of the point in Trigger after maybe Kill la Kill. It felt like it just kind of became signature for them for a while, and Edge Runners brought it back to like, no, it is this like outrageous for a reason as part of the theme. So excited to see what happens next. Like obviously they've had like Delicious and Dungeon, but that's not written by them. That's just an animation. I think like what is it? Darling in the Franxx, I think is the same thing. They animated it but did not write it. It's also interesting, like even Abenobashi had Madhouse with animation, so some of this credit should go to them as well. That it wasn't all Gainax. I think it might even be listed under Madhouse in some places, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's a Gainax story. Look at it. No disrespect to Madhouse. They made like every Satoshi Kon film, and those are fantastic. Go watch them all. I said I wasn't going to do a rambly thing, and I did a rambly thing. Anyway, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, I have pronouns now. I'm looking at the wrong spot. I'm not making eye contact. I fucked up the joke. Anyway, if you're still here, there's a chance that you like this crap enough to support me on Patreon, where you get your name in the credits like what you're seeing right now, as well as early access to ad-free versions of these videos, anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks early. Like this one will probably be 2 weeks early for everyone. I need to get better at putting that in videos and not at the end, when the only people left listening are the ones who've already considered all that stuff. Anyway, this was a more fun video. I like that. I'm trying to get back to like being not overly serious all the time. So anyway, thanks for watching.